welcome back to the Sports Wrap. Joined now by Ken Fang, associate editor of the popular sports blog Awful Announcing and The Comeback. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to touch on a lot of sports media stories. I want to start with the Adam Jones story that has made national news the last couple days. How have you seen it being covered on a local level versus national, and that Boston being pegged kind of as a racist city has become this narrative?
It's an amazing story because, first of all, it's not just a Boston versus a Baltimore story.
Sure.
Yianni, it's become a national story. I mean, when the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley even mentions it,
Sure.
It's a national story. It's transcended sports. So people of Boston are very defensive about it. The media has become too. Albert Breer, who is a Boston native,
Sure.
Sports Illustrated NFL person, he has really come and defended Boston, but at the same time sounded a little bit tone deaf in his defense.
He got into it with someone on Twitter, right?
Yes, absolutely, and he's been wanting proof. And in this day and age, yes, we actually want to see proof, but at the same time, no one's going to have the actual smoking gun at that moment. So I have a feeling that this is one of those stories that it's going to have legs for a little while because now we've heard NBA players talk about it, and the NFL is going to be talking about it. So, but it's also good to have this discussion because we're going to have not only teams want to make things better for the fans, but also for the players too.
Back to the national media versus local media. When you think of something like deflategate and how ESPN and some other national outlets covered it versus the tone here locally, how do you compare the two specific to the Patriots in that story?
Well, as you well know, Yianni, Patriots fans are very defensive and very militant, and they still hold a grudge about ESPN and how they covered it, in particular Chris Mortensen. So you see that vitriol still going on there. Whereas nationally, I think that most of the national media has let go of it because it's now done with. It's no longer part of that cycle. But fans in the media here, they still have a little bit of a grudge and a little bit of an edge to it. So I think that they don't want to let go of it at this point, especially with the way the Patriots have been playing, and they want a little rub it into the fans.
All right, you cover ESPN heavily on Awful Announcing. Obviously, huge news last week with the layoffs, up to 100 on-air writers and anchors and reporters. Some big names: Ed Werder, Jason Stark, Andy Katz. What did you make of this, and what does it say about our business? Obviously, we know they have the very expensive rights deals, and the cord cutters out there make their business model a little bit different. What was your reaction to it all? Well,
we've been covering this for a long time, and probably it's been a long time coming because, as you mentioned, the rights fees and the high salaries and these people who have been there for a long time, they're getting paid well. And the issue is that when you mention cord cutters, you're not getting as much revenue in. When you're paying a lot of money to have $2 billion a year for the NFL and Monday Night Football with not a great schedule, with one playoff game and no Super Bowls, and the NBA you're paying $1.4 billion for, something has to come home. So unfortunately, the workers and the people paid the price for it, and a lot of on-air people, and it's a result of bad decisions made over the last 4 or 5 years.
You think ESPN will still be king of the sports media landscape going forward? Is this kind of just a little blip on the radar, or?
They'll still be around. They're still profitable. They're just not making as much money as they used to be. They're not the cash cow.
But their ratings crush FS1 and the other sports networks.
Absolutely. They're still doing very well. You still go to them when you want coverage of a big moment. They're still there to cover the Super Bowl. They're still there to cover the NBA playoffs, baseball too. So they're not going anywhere. It's just the issue is that the emphasis of a lot of other sports like the NHL, they've cut a lot of people who covered baseball, as you mentioned, Jason Stark too, so who used to work here in Providence. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Is he a Projo guy?
He was a Projo guy and then went to Philadelphia.
Projo has a long list of very accomplished sports writers. What is the big sports media story on the horizon here that maybe a lot of people at home aren't looking at right now? What do you? Obviously, the Tony Romo shakeup with CBS was big news. Anything down the line here you see coming up?
The big thing is going to be ESPN and Fox Sports 1 and Fox FS1 covering the Big Ten. That's going to be interesting to see how that's going to come about. ESPN used to have the #1 picks of all the games. Now Fox Sports 1 is going to have that. So when you're used to seeing Ohio State and Michigan on ESPN and ABC, you'll see that on Fox instead.
Oh, that'll be interesting. All right. Lastly, the life of a sports blogger. Tell me about your your average day as you're scouring the internet and getting content for Awful Announcing?
Well, it starts early in the morning. You wake up, and we have what's called Slack, an app that we discuss internally and how we some of the bigger stories of the day. And then my editor tells me, well, Ken, we want 1, 2, and 3:30 filled. So I'll look for stories on that. And sometimes it's very slow and you look for stuff. But other times it's a busy day. Like today, we found out that Verizon is going to pay $21 million for the rights to stream one game of the NFL in September. So that's something like that. Then you have to jump on that and change gears and then write about that. So it's always exciting. It's a beat that never sleeps.
Sure. And social media, obviously, in 2017 is the most important thing, right?
Absolutely. And it's all important, and it's all part of it, and all encompasses, and it never makes for a boring beat.
Sure. All right. And your Twitter handle is?
@FangsBites.
@FangsBites. All right. Thanks so much for coming in, and much more from the Sports Wrap.